Welcome to today's webinar, where we are going to discuss open infrastructure towards digitalization. We would like to extend our sincere appreciation and flexibility for those attendees for allowing us to reschedule from last week. And we hope you find today very, very informative. If you would like to ask any questions during the session, there is a question and answer box on the screen, so feel free to type your questions in that box and we will address them at the end of the session. So with that, I will turn it over to Saba to start things off.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning and welcome to this webinar. We at the Bahrain Telecommunication Regulatory Authority are really glad to host this webinar and invite speakers from Open Compute Project and Open Networking Forum. Some of you here in Bahrain would already know who I am. For those who don't know me yet, I'm Sabah Al-Kubaisi. I have previously worked and assumed many technology-related roles within the telecom industry before I joined the TRA Bahrain as the Senior Technology Advisor. It's nice to see that we have a good number of registrants to this webinar from local and regional telcos, as well as cloud providers and other infrastructure providers. We can see also that there are a good number of registrants from the academia who hopefully will be the future leaders in this ever-growing digital industry. Thank you all for attending. I'd like to thank our speakers, Steve Helvey from OCP and Ahmed Abdelaziz from ONF for sparing their time with us today. And I would also like to thank my colleagues here at the TRA who supported in making this webinar take place. Some of you might be wondering why a telecommunication regulatory authority would be interested in hosting a webinar about IT infrastructure. I will provide a quick overview on why we have carefully selected this, the likes of OCP and ONF to update us on open IT infrastructure initiatives within the industry and how it is contributing towards the digitalization across different verticals of the industry. As we all know that we are living in a rapidly changing world in which digitalization affects every part of our daily lives, including the way we work, the way we stay in touch with family and friends, the way we shop and learn. Even our kids these days are attending online schooling and it's becoming a norm for them. We usually would hold such workshops in face-to-face meeting. However, with the new norm, we're all attending remotely through webinars. The dependence of the digital services on the ICT infrastructure and openness is actually quite massive. Digital services have pushed for the emergence of modern consumer-based ecosystems, ecosystems which adapt in real time to the evolving needs of consumers. Such ecosystems enable seamless access to services that people want and need. The digitalization of services and even digitalization of businesses is changing the way how businesses operate and create value, changes the way how products and services are created and delivered, and even how end users can access and use such products and services. Advanced technologies will stimulate ICT service providers such as telcos, application developers, cloud service providers, and even infrastructure providers. Advanced technologies will also introduce an opportunity to transform designs of new and even existing services such as healthcare, smart cities, mobile services, cloud services, IoT and manufacturing, you name it. My personal favorites, artificial intelligence and data centers. Digitalization actually challenges the status quo in terms of how policymakers, regulators, telcos, and private sectors think of investment and funding such infrastructure rollouts. So actually, digitalization is here to bring a wave of innovation in how we look at designing even the infrastructure to deliver such new services, and ultimately to create services that evolve in real time to adapt to what actually people need And this is why we are eager at the TRA to promote and encourage open compute and open architecture within the ICT and telecom infrastructure, as it is the foundation towards the digitalization. And this is going to be the focus of today's workshop, how service providers can actually reimagine their IT infrastructure deployments, driving efficiency and agility for innovative services to be offered with much more shorter time to market, obviously. So many of us went virtual in 2020 by necessity. Last year, obviously, as COVID-19 social distancing requirements forced millions into remote activities. With the continued growth and adoption of digital services, it is expected that the years to come will only demand even more from the digital economy and will rapidly catalyze the digital transformation. Almost every aspect of life has moved online, making people much more dependent on digital services and the internet. To be convinced, we shall only look at how much data is being generated and consumed. For example, at the TRA, we monitor and the internet performance, especially during COVID, ensuring the general public in the kingdom are seamlessly connected, and we do publish such periodic reports on our website. As the world changes, consumer behavior changes, influencing businesses to adapt and transform, not only to survive, but to grow. We've noticed at the TRA that governments from developed and developing economies are adopting cloud-first policies, for example, to enhance agility, reliability, innovation at both the public and private sectors. In such a context, new ways of delivering and creating data are constantly emerging. We believe that it is imperative for telcos and the ICT industry in general to evolve in deploying infrastructure, leveraging new emerging concepts such as open platform, the power of open compute, open software, open hardware. In general, open technologies are not only used by large enterprise businesses, as many may think, but are of a great value to telcos with all the imminent IoT rollouts. For example, 5G applications and use cases, which demand for greater infrastructure and device densifications. As we know, IoT devices will densely grow. The quantity of information will skyrocket. Technologies such as open compute and edge compute are playing an important role in processing and acting on data. For example, edge technology permits data storage and processing to be performed nearer to where data is being collected or generated. And consequently, it helps organizations to analyze information in close to real time for enhanced consumer experience, obviously. So the industry landscape, as you can see, there are many players driving different pillars of the industry. And this is where it is important for the industry bodies to streamline initiatives. You can see on the right side that industry bodies are contributing across the different infrastructure layers. We have chosen ONF and OCP to brief the industry on what open source initiatives has been gaining traction and how the entire industry needs to participate early to align internationally with the best practices, obviously. The main advancements of open infrastructure is driven by many forces. Telcos advanced services, cloud computing penetration, technology advancements, they are only examples. So telcos and cloud service providers most probably will be leading open infrastructure deployments by firstly satisfying 5G requirements and then offer services with greater capacity, enhance speeds and massively reduce latency. So the power of open source for emerging technologies and why open networking? The idea is that all those systems and technologies must be deployed on a physical compute infrastructure. We're all engineers. We know that a virtual resource has to reside on a physical resource end of the day. And this is where open software and open hardware comes into play. Utilizing the power of open software and hardware for imminent response and action will enable breeds of intelligent services and systems, which can execute actions and learn with the support of emerging technologies. So actually leveraging on emerging technologies such as AI, for example, combined with the power of openness, will uncover trends that people might otherwise never realize nor even predicted. So many might ask, what will the industry be really in need of these days? So we believe sustainable models implemented in the right way is imperative. This is to reduce complexity, accelerate growth, deliver significantly enhanced computing economics. So cost efficiency and flexible deployments that are purpose-built to maximize performance, compute density, and energy efficiency are exactly what cloud service providers, telcos, and even content providers would need to accelerate and scale their new applications. So the open ecosystem collaboration, this is where I will leave you today with our speakers from OCP and ONF, who will deep dive in explaining what is open networking, what is open hardware, what is open software, the pros and cons of each, how this aggregated approach of deploying new networks and infrastructure is actually vital to embrace by the telcos and the ICT general infrastructure providers in general, obviously compared to conventional approaches for operators and industry players to truly capture the fruits of automation and virtualization. So we will leave time towards the end for Q&A, where I strongly urge operators and service integrators to deep dive into their relevant initiatives, to explore how to collaborate or even join specific initiatives within each of those forums. You need to immerse within what you could be deploying in the near future, hopefully. So do raise questions at the end, explore how to benefit from the established community labs to test within the established interoperable ecosystems. Without further ado, I will hand over to Steve to brief you on how OCP has been leading in open compute, who will then hand over to Ahmed to brief on what the folks at ONF has been busy with lately. So thank you very much and hope you enjoy this webinar and have a great day.
Thank you, Saba, for the warm introduction and highlighting today's topics. My name is Steve Helvey, and I'm part of the team at the Open Compute Project, or OCP. And I want to thank everyone at the TRA for allowing us to participate in today's session. This is the first OCP event that we've ever done in Bahrain. So I'm hoping that those of you who are joining from around the region find it educational and informative, and perhaps get you to think a little differently about infrastructure moving forward. Along with my colleague at ONF, we'll be speaking a lot about open software and open hardware. There are two terms that I want to make sure and define up front as I begin speaking about open hardware. And those are OEM and ODM white box. An OEM, or original equipment manufacturer, is a company that buys a lot of the components from the manufacturer. They assemble them, rebrand them under their own name. They create a product for more of the mass market. And a lot of their support structure is based on the product and managed services. An ODM, or white box, is the manufacturer of those components, and they can do full product design and full product lifecycle. They can be more specialized in providing system or custom-built, purpose-built hardware, and also services around the product as well as managed services. But keep those two terms in mind as I share a little bit about what's happening in the market. So in the past, if I wanted a server or a switch, I would contact my OEM provider and I would order it from them. But let me show you what's happening here in the last few years. This is a graph showing the server shipments from 2016 through 2018. And you can see on the right-hand side several of your famous brand name OEM providers. But the top graph showing ODM Direct means that those customers are buying direct from the manufacturer. So you can see what happened right around 2017 is this growth and this comfort level of buying direct from the manufacturer. And that trend is continuing even through 2020. You can see I've highlighted Infra, who is an ODM, one of the largest server makers in the world, based in China, and then the ODM Direct. And you can see the market share at 34% and the growth at 52% and at 61%. So people are becoming more comfortable buying direct from the manufacturer. And most of these manufacturers are providing and selling and making open designs and open source hardware. So when you take that ODM and the white box model and you open source it, that is the genesis or the foundation for OCP. OCP is right now a little over $5 to $6 billion. We'll be up over $11 billion by 2023. Calling out the open networking market specific, that's 1.35 billion in the next 2 to 3 years. And I've highlighted that Telco is going to be the key growth vertical for open hardware moving forward. The OCP Foundation itself is made up of over 200 companies, 8,000 engineers, and almost 200 contributions so far throughout the community. Like other open source organizations, we have a list of projects. We have 25 to 30 different projects across the data center that are run by our own engineers that manage inbound contributions, all working on common problems across the data center. So we have end users working with vendors, working with suppliers, coming up with common specifications and manufacturing products according to those specifications. There are 4 key tenets that manage everything that we do within Open Compute: efficiency, growth, scale, and openness. So we measure everything that's coming through the foundation based on those 4 key tenets. And let me give you a couple of examples of those tenets in action. This here is a common server bezel. It is the piece of plastic that goes across the front of the server. And in many cases, there are hundreds of these type of server bezels. And some people have called it gratuitous differentiation, different for the sake of being different and not really adding any particular value. Let me share with you what an OCP server looks like. Very minimalistic design, very efficient. And let me call your attention to the red highlighted circles and those green touch points. It allows you to change almost any part in the server without using a tool. So it's this passion that we have for simplicity that drives everything that we do within Open Compute. I'll give you another quick example. The fans. In a traditional server, you may have 8 40-millimeter fans that run across the back of those servers. In an OCP server, it's 2 80-millimeter fans. And what happens is you have what's called the server fan cube law. I can reduce the fan speed by half. And as a result, I can reduce the energy needed to spin that fan 7/8. So let me repeat that. I can half the speed of my fan, and as a result, I only need 7/8 less energy to turn that fan. So we use 2 bigger fans that allows for better airflow and higher efficiency. Here's an example of that efficiency in action. SK Telecom in Korea did some studies between OCP hardware and legacy or OEM style hardware. And you can see on the left, OCP running 50% more efficient at 0 workload. And even at 100% workload, OCP is almost 20% more efficient. And we see that across industries. We have hyperscalers doing those studies. We have service providers doing those studies. We have research and academic institutes doing those studies. And we consistently see between 20 to 50% more efficient than traditional hardware. So why would someone open source their hardware? Well, from an end user standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. I can have one specification and I can have multiple suppliers making me something based off of the same spec. So I mitigate my supply chain risk and I have dual sourcing. I can also keep up with the pace of innovation that happens within an open source community. From the vendor side, I get access and speed to market. In these communities, you can work with end customers and other suppliers to get a broader perspective on what customers actually want and get a better sense of where do I take my products and what makes the most sense for my organization and what verticals are looking at particular technologies. So what effect has open software had on open hardware? This is a quick history of what happens with virtual machines and its effect on hardware. Prior to any virtual machine, moving up to 2008 and then on to 2018, you can see with the increase in VM potential, the reduction in hardware that is needed. Almost 66% less hardware is needed than prior to no virtual machines at all. And Facebook had another great example where they were experiencing a large growth of their web servers on the front end. So they created an open source software called HipHop Virtual Machine. That open source software allowed them to reduce their web front end servers by 80%. So open source software and virtualization has had a dramatic impact on the reduction of hardware. And it's not just in large telco or service provider industries. This here is an example from Deutsche Bank and their session from the CTO a couple years ago, as they went through this journey about re-architecting their infrastructure. And they realized that they can run 85% of their apps, the cloud native apps, on just 20% of the physical servers, a 2/3 reduction in server hardware. So we expect to see this continue. And this was back in 2017, and we've certainly seen this moving forward with more open source software driving the reduction in hardware. So where can I see some of this open source hardware? Well, we have a marketplace on our website that has servers, storage, networking devices, including fully integrated solutions. So as I mentioned, there are some of those ODMs or manufacturers that you may never have heard of. You may never have heard of Mytech or WeWin or UfiSpace or EdgeCore. But these are some of the largest manufacturers of network devices and servers in the world. And what's more important is that they've all been certified on ONF. So here's a quick example of an open edge server that we have with some compute servers and networking devices, as well as storage devices, all running enterprise level software, both commercial as well as open source. But I also wanted to highlight that every one of these products are also certified on ONF software. So our open edge server is running Ether. It's been certified to run Ether, and I know that Ahmed is going to go into detail about Ether and the ability to use Ether as a private 5G software. We have Access Edge or central office servers, full integrated servers for Access Edge, full racks, and a lot of networking devices running ONF software. Here's an example of an integrated solution on a disaggregated 5G network. And every green box that you see, including the central office, can all house open hardware products, from the core data center to the central office to the aggregation router to the OLT and the disaggregated cell site gateway. EdgeCore, Mytech, UfiSpace, WeWin, all able to provide open source hardware running ONF software across that infrastructure. So how is open hardware affecting 5G and the edge? Well, almost every day you can find an article around 5G. And also you can find articles around 5G and open source together. There's a great video that I highly recommend that was put on by ONF from the CTO of Rakuten. And he talks about how he's developed his entire network based on open source infrastructure, both open source hardware and open source software. And I've included the link here, so I highly encourage you to take a look at that video when you have time. And during his talk, he highlights the CapEx that he's saving and the hardware reduction costs that he's seeing, traditional versus open architecture for 5G. And the numbers are pretty impressive. There are other telcos, Telefonica using OCP for central offices, AT&T replacing a lot of their routers from proprietary hardware to white box products built to their specification. So contributing and helping, working with a manufacturer to write a specification, open sourcing that to a community, and then having dual supply chain and the flexibility to really take advantage of open architecture. So how do I get involved? Please visit our marketplace. Please feel free to email me, steve@opencompute.org. I'm happy to have one-on-one sessions with your team to help you understand a little bit more about Open Compute. You can, of course, become a member. You can join a project, collaborate, and contribute. So I'll leave you with the thought that open source will just be a part of how you do business in the future. And that's Tim O'Reilly, who coined the term open source. But it really is a key part of everyone's business. And so now it's not just open source software, it's open source hardware underneath. So now I'll turn it over to my colleague Ahmed from ONF to tell you a little bit more about ONF software, their organization, and again, highlighting the importance of Ether in their ecosystem. Thank you.
Hello and welcome. This is Ahmed Abdelaziz, Ambassador at the Open Network Foundation, in short, ONF. Before we start, I would like to express our thankful and grateful to TRA of the Bahrain for giving us this opportunity to share some of the Open Infrastructure project from the ONF, and we hope that this project can contribute and leverage the next wave of the digital transformation. First, I would like to provide you with the brief overview about ONF. Most of you know ONF is responsible of the standard of the OpenFlow protocol specifications and some software-defined network interfaces. But actually, Open Network Foundation is non-profit operators lead consortium with the mission of driving the transformation of the network infrastructure and carrier business model. The ONF serve as the umbrella for a number of the project building solution by leveraging the disaggregation white box, open source, using technology like software-defined network, NFV, and cloud to revolutionize the carrier industry. In the ONF, we have a membership program with the different levels. In the top, we have operator and vendor partners, and also we have inventor operator and inventor vendors. At the bottom, we have number of the collaborators. All these operators have come together to address a common problem in the telecommunication industries. Partners has exclusive right to build a commercial offering leveraging pre-built projects in incubation phases. This incubation phases typically between 12 to 18 months. Other members receive early access to incubation project, which will help them achieve a better time to the market and earlier trials with the operator or downstream supplier. ONF members are protected when using the intellectual properties reference in any open flow, in any ONF RD specification. Actually, by working closely with the network operator and other stakeholders, ONF has achieved significant momentum. Number one, ONF has catalyzed the formation of the community of the over 200 partner members and collaborators. Also, ONF has led the software-defined network movement and brought open source collaborative development to the networkings. In addition to that, ONF has invented a unique open source business models, plus operator reference design process. In fact, these two are powering our effort to take platform into production networks. When we're talking about the ONF project, as I mentioned before, Open Network Foundation serve as the umbrella for the number of the projects using white boxes, SDN and NFV, and different technology to revolutionize the networking and carrier industry. At the ONF, we have putting together all the building block necessary to provide a solution in both fixed and wireless domains. As you can see, all our solution working based on the white boxes hardware, and we have a various solution in different networks. For example, in the SDN and data plane levels, we have ONOS project. ONOS is the open source network operating system. It is SDN controller for building next generation SDN network solution. And also we have Stratum. And Stratum is the Silicon Independent Switch operating system for software-defined networks. Stratum exhibits a set of the next generation SDN interfaces, including B4 runtime and open config and others standard interfaces. Also, we have a B4. A B4 is the programming protocol independent packet processor. It is a domain-specific language for expressing how the packets are processed by the data plane elements. It can be used in the software and hardware switches. In the level of the SDN infrastructure, we have a Telarus and ODTN. Telarus is the leaf spine fabric supporting distributed access network. Telarus will reduce the total cost of the ownership and makes it is easy for the operator to customize it for their applications. ODTNs is the open and disaggregation transport network project. It is designed to build a data center interconnected using the disaggregated optical equipment. In the level of the edge cloud infrastructure, two projects, CORD and XOS. CORD is the central office 3 architecture as a data center. It is platform, leverage the SDN, NFV, cloud technology to build agile data centers. Actually, CORD come to replace the traditional central office of the operator with the virtual cloud native data center. XOS is designed around the principle of the everything as a services, and it is used with the core to orchestrate the NFV services. In the access and core network, we have a SIPA and COMAC. SIPA is a software-defined enabled broadband access. It is support both residential access and wireless backhaul, and it is optimized such that traffic can run fast path straight through the backbone without required VNF processing on the server. It is built with the containerization and uses the Kubernetes technology. COMAC coverage multiple access and core. It is leveraged SDN also and cloud principle to disaggregate element and will be built on microservices architecture. So, sorry, the operator can dynamically place elements where they best serve their needs. They can put it in the access or in the edge or in the core and even in the cloud. In the level of the service platforms, we have a project called Ether. Ether is the first open source 5G connected edge platform for enabling enterprise digital transformation. It's provide mobile connectivity and edge cloud services for distributed enterprise network at the cloud managed offering. So to understand the maturity of these platforms, I would like to share their market progress. Our solution ONOS actually was placed in the productions network with the Comcast and currently in the scaling. And our vendors, Huawei was built intent-driven network solutions called iMaster, and this solution based on the ONOS controller. Our disaggregate optical solution, ODTN, is in the field of the trial with the Telefonica. Our platform, OMEC, in the production with the T-Mobile in Poland, and will move from the trial to production in United States soon. SIBA platform is in the various stage of the trial deployment with the AT&T, Dutch Telecom and Turkish Telecom and Telefonica. Our latest platforms either is currently undergoing a pilot with some partner site. In ONF, we have a unique reference design. This unique reference design show how ONF is working with their partners. Previously, I mentioned that ONF is the operator leader consortium. So in March 2018, ONF operator leadership extend ONF missions to create a new strategic plan to deploy open source solution into their production networks. By committing to take open source solution into productions, ONF operator member are enabled a new supply chain ecosystem to help realize the full potential of the SDN and disaggregation and open source. So our operator partner come together to agree a common use cases they want to ONF pursue. These use cases manifest themselves into rough designs, and at the same time, they also make agreements to deploy products based this design into their networks. And we made each one of these reference design with the complementary example platforms. This example platform are codified into solution using our open source component and ready for trials and deployment. Actually, Open Network Foundation has a unique characteristic at the open source initiative. First of all, ONF is the open source initiative with the dedicated engineering team. All of the engineers are ONF employees. So with this dedicated lab, ONF can accelerate the innovations. Also, ONF driving disruption essentially at the access and edge network, because most of the majority of the CAPEX and OPEX cost at the operator edge. So to understand also the ONF impact in the industry economically, in September 2019, Arthur D. Letter published a study on the impact of the open source by analyzing the network of the AT&T, Dutch Telecom, and Telefonica, and all these our partners. Their report titled "Who Dares Wins." In this report, three keys taken away from the economic perspective. The first key that showed that CAPEX is reducing by 40%, and the OPEX is reducing by 25%, and incremental revenue opportunity can be up to 11%. Another study did by the 650 groups in the September 2019 also, the group did their own research on the impact of the open source on the telecommunication industry at large. The research showed that the $490 billion of the market share are being directly impacted by the Open Network Foundation projects. 10 to 15 of the CAPEX budget currently focusing on the open source. 85% of the service provider uh, confined or confirm that uh, they will adopt open source by 2023. Broadband access will complete this journey to open source in the next 5 years. So also ONF had a context with the other open source ecosystems. So this open source ecosystem is creating a comprehensive stack that is posed to delivery robust solution over the time. From the white box to end-to-end solution, all our solution either OCP or TIPA certified, and some of the software using the containers such as the Akran or Kubernetes or Docker containers and orchestrated by the ONAB and OSN. Last year, ONF announced that we are working with the Open RAN Alliance, and actually Open RAN Alliance is the worldwide carrier lead effort to drive a new level of the openness and intelligence into the radio access network of the next generation wireless system. Their core principle uh, envision future RAN to be built upon the virtualization network elements such as the white boxes hardware and standard uh, interfaces. So the benefit of the SDNs ecosystem for the operators, if you are operators, so ONF will help you to accelerate the innovations. ONF will reduce the CAPEX and OPEX of your solutions. Also, ONF can make you to lead the industry in creation of the next generation open source solutions. If you are a system integrator, ONF will help operator plan, build and operate their networks. New business opportunity helping operator as they transfer their networks. If you are supply chains, we will gain earlier visibility into operator requirements, and you can create production in partnership with the operator. Also, you can capture a share of the 490 billion market transformation resulting from the ONF based open source. ONF also had a unique CICD pipelines. So continuous integrations is the process that driving the development team to implement a small change and check in the code to version control repository, frequency, accelerating deployment of the enhancement and updates. The continued development provides the ability to test the code revision and ongoing basis and validate a new features and update using automated tests that provide feedback to the developer or to development teams quickly if the code has passed or fails. Our last step, which starting recently, continuous certification, is the software passes regression testing. The ONF Marketplace website reflects the update, providing timely and co-signed visibility into complementary between any product and platforms. So in the next minute, I'm going to go in details in one of our solution called Ether. Ether is private 5G LTE cloud at the service solutions. So Ether is the enterprise 5G LTE edge cloud at the services. Ether is the first open source platform designed for the edge cloud capabilities to enable the smart enterprise with the private 5G connectivity. The question now, why the enterprise? Today, enterprise network using the Wi-Fi networks, and these Wi-Fi network are insufficient for handling the need of the IoT-enabled digital transformation due to the lack of the reliability, capabilities, and security. So wireless connection needed to be reliable, secure, and predictable, and delivered with the low latency, especially for the mission critical application. Mobile network are superior in all these dimensions, but historically they have been expensive, these mobile networks, complicated and out of the reach to the enterprise who want to operate their networks. Also, enterprise want to fully control their own data, controlling who can access it and where it live and migrates. This creates a need for the programmatic traffic localizations and subscribe connectivity service graph construction and management. Enterprise also needed to be able to deploy edge services from the public providers, public cloud provider like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud are all enabling the execution of the latency sensitive function in cloudlets on site at the enterprises. In addition to that, enterprise needed a single platforms that can seamlessly support deployment of the edge service from the any all of the cloud provider. This project has been selected at the software layer for the new 30 million funded project from the DARPA last year. So when you look into the either deployment, the diagram shows that either deployment divided into two parts. The first part called connected edge, connected ether edge, this part, and the second part called ether central. So ether edge will deploy it in the enterprise network, and it is include SD-RANs, Open RAN controller that managed by the ONOS controller and mobile core user plane use Telarus at the leaf spine fabric networks. In the left side, we can see all the enterprise systems such as the IoT sensor systems and multimedia system and employee and visitor systems. This system connected to the licensed and unlicensed spectrum. This including the band 7 or CBRS communications. In the connected edge, the AI and machine learning platform software of the public cloud can be installed, and all the edge apps are running on the enterprise networks. Either central will deploy in the cloud at the right side and control all the side of the ACERs. So also the mobile user control plane is used to manage the mobile core users in connected edge. Other central IoT, machine learning, AI apps are installed in the cloud. So this solution used based on the QP nets based micro data centers running the in the enterprise networks. So this hosting combination of the Ether connectivity service and optionally one or more third-party edge platform applications selected by the enterprise. The network is built based on the SDN-based switch fabric constructed from the P4 programming, white box switches, open flow switches. The switches are arranged in the leaf spine topology and controlled by the ONOS SDN controller operating system. The fabric data plane is used also to collect some in-band network telemetry. This is collect fine-grained data, and before also use it to implement a mobile core user plane function UPF on the switch at the part of the fabric data plane. So this solution will enable the digital transformations This solution will enable the digital transformations. And if you look into the activity of the enterprise in this diagram, you can note that this activity can divide it into two parts. The first part is the operation technologies, which need a sub-seconds like sensor and reboot, BLS and SCADA. This will be transferred or transmit to the private edge cloud in the enterprise networks, and other activities like ERP system or IT operation still can send to the central cloud, because the delay and the latency is not issue in this case. So actually, Ether create ecosystems. So telecommunication or teleco operator extend a footprint using license spectrums in the enterprise networks. Public cloud operator deploy their edge cloud services in the enterprise networks. New business building private network for the enterprises. Enterprise build their own private network also. So either is enabling many new form of the partner opportunity, bring telecom and cloud operators together to give, to enhance the enterprise networks. So will create an open source ecosystem, helping bring the industry together. Actually, Ether only platform brings the edge and run together. So ONF has been lead innovations in three areas. The first area is edge cloud, mobile edge, and open run. So Ether is a unique, and all these three is important technology. We combined all three to create a unique platform enabling enterprise digital transformations, all available in one source, enabling collaborative or collaborations and new business models. Currently, Ether work with the Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, and soon it will be integrated with the AWS and others public cloud. So we have SDN infrastructures and cloud infrastructure. On top of that, we have our solution 5G LTE connectivity with the API. So either API can easy integrate it with the public cloud API to allow enterprise applications to be, integrated with the third party application. Currently, Ether was deployed in some countries in US, Canada, and in Madrid, Osaka also. We have a lab there. As I mentioned, it is pilot now, and we are ready for any research institution or university that willing to test and implement this 5G as the lab. We can help them. So thank you. And if you have any questions, you can ask me.
Thank you, Ahmed. Now that you know more about ONF and you know more about Open Compute, I wanted to quickly touch on two other organizations that are doing some interesting things in the telecom space. The first is the Telecom Infrastructure Project, or TIP, and the second is the ORAN Alliance. Now, TIP was started in 2016 by Facebook. Facebook started OCP in 2011, focused on the data center, and then in 2016 they started TIP to focus on open infrastructure, open design, and disaggregation among telcos. And it's structured very similar to OCP and ONF, where you have a board of directors, you have technical steering committees, you have innovation labs, and you have project groups where a lot of the work happens. On the right-hand side, you can see the different project groups within TIP. And while I want to call your attention to the Open RAN, which is under the product group category. Open RAN is different than the ORAN Alliance, but they're complementary, and I'll explain the difference here as we go along. Why Open RAN? Well, RAN is 60% of the CapEx and OpEx within a telco. So if you can drive open standards and open efficiencies and interoperability across that RAN, you can significantly reduce your CapEx and OpEx. And that's why there's so many organizations focusing on this open RAN area. The way that the product working group within TIP is structured for Open RAN, you have the component subgroups around the RU and the DU and CU, as well as the radio intelligence and automation. And then you have the segment subgroups on the right with outdoor and indoor. And OCP and ONF are across that left-hand group, specifically in OCP's case, it's across the DU area where we have products that have met that particular specification for Open RAN, and as well as many, many switches that meet the specs for TIP as well. The way that the workflow happens within TIP is you have common requirements based off of a specification. You have multiple suppliers. Again, very similar to Open Compute, where you have one specification, multiple suppliers, and then you can see the ONF software that applies to that group as well. Moving on to interoperability in stage 4, test and validation, over to field trials, and then finally to production and adoption. I do want to call your attention to where O-RAN Alliance fits in, which is at the beginning on the specifications, helping drive those specifications, as well as the interoperability and the testing and the validation area. Here is where the global Open RAN deployments are and the trials currently within TIP. You have Vodafone throughout Europe and Africa. You also have Airtel in India, you have Telefonica in Peru, and TIM in Brazil, as well as a few North American content providers as well. And then the Rakuten as well is what I mentioned earlier in their deployment of open infrastructure. The way that the O-RAN Alliance came about is it's a combination of two different other organizations. So you had the C-RAN Alliance, which was a lot of the China operators. You had X-RAN, which were North American, European, and the rest of the APAC providers, such as folks out of Japan and South Korea, coming together to form the O-RAN Alliance in 2018 with founding members of AT&T, DT, China Mobile, Docomo, as well as Orange. So a relatively new organization, the newest of all the organizations that we've discussed today. So again, I wanted to highlight the difference between the O-RAN Alliance and TIP Open RAN. O-RAN Alliance driving standards to ensure operability and creating standards where none have existed before. So creating those profiles as well for interoperability. And TIP, based on the diagram I showed earlier, a lot of execution and deployment focus, enabling an ecosystem of interoperability for trials, field tests, and deployments. So complementary organizations, but slightly different. So that's a bit about ONF, OCP, TIP, and the O-RAN Alliance. So I want to leave you with a couple thoughts that open communities are at the core of business in the future. You see organizations working together, not in silos. The way that things used to happen is you have technology being created and it would go to an OEM, and an OEM would decide what features to release in their next product that would be able to sell to the masses. So users were constrained by what the OEM was able to provide. In this new model, carriers sitting down with providers, architects, designing a specification, multiple suppliers, a community developing the product that meets their needs. Now you have the technology going direct to the users through an open community. So I want to thank you today for taking the time, and now we'll move to live Q&A. Hello, everyone. Hope you found that very informative. So let's quickly run through here and see what kind of questions we may have for Ahmed and Saba. Saba, I'll start here with one for you. What is the TRA's role in driving these open infrastructures? And are there going to be regulatory guidance around open source hardware and open source software in the future?
Actually, that's a really good question. We at TRA Bahrain, we've always been technology agnostic, ensuring that we have future proof for any technology advancements. So with that in mind, we have always ensured to intervene only when required, making sure that we keep always the phase for competition to grow. Having said that, we always promote the local industry to look into deploying the latest advanced technologies, obviously, for innovative services and operations. Alongside the digitalization team that we have created within the TRA Bahrain, that has been formed internally, we always will be happy to support and where required, obviously. So, yeah.
That's good. Okay, let's see. I have a couple other questions here. How do I get the slides from today's session? They will be posted for you to be able to download, as well as we will also post them across our social channels within the TRA, ONF, and OCP as well. Ahmed, have one here, a question for you. Is there an ONF lab in Bahrain, or how does one start to test the ONF software based on their location, or is they Central Middle Eastern lab?
Actually, we don't have a lab in Bahrain, but in general, if you want to test the ONF projects, we have a simulation called Mininets. You can test some project, not all. For example, you can test ONOS and some others ONF projects. But for example, for the Ether, it is difficult to use in the simulation. So we need a labs. Currently, we have negotiate with some UAE university to deploy this lab, and we hope that soon we can do that. Yes.
Yep, great. So Saba, another question. Are there going to be additional workshops in the future that the TRA will be holding around these type of technologies?
Definitely. We're always eager to host any technology-related workshops, especially if we get to see that there is a good motive around that towards digitalization and towards what the market and the trends is going towards. So this is going to be only the start of it. We definitely have kind of a plan in terms of making sure, especially it's much easier nowadays with the webinars to gather everyone around. People are getting used to this. So yes, we will have such webinars down the road, hopefully this year.
Great. And there's a question here on open compute. I see one of your projects is a telco project. How does that work with ONF? So the projects that we have are driven by our volunteers, as I had mentioned. So the telco project itself is led by a volunteer in the community. And again, we're focused more on the hardware from the data center out to the edge. And at the edge area is where we overlap with other organizations such as TIP. In ONF, we are across both the central office, helping certifying the software on open hardware, and then of course all the way out through Ether, which we have a lot of joint efforts there. The new Ether certification on the Open Edge server is one of our most viewed products on our marketplace. Okay, let me see what other questions here we have. All right, Ahmed, you are an ambassador for ONF. So what does that mean, that you're an ambassador for ONF, and how can people work with you throughout the region if they have questions?
Yeah, actually, in the slide I mentioned that we have a partnership program. This is for the company, And also we have ambassador programs. These ambassador programs welcome anyone who willing to contribute in the open source projects. So currently we are 31 ambassador around the world, but we are welcome anyone who like to join these communities. So we are so collaborated with any university or organization or in the company that want to work together to let people understand this new movement of the open source network or open networking. So to join this program, yes, you can go to opennetwork.org and just fill the forms, and definitely they will interview you if you want to join. So you have to have a deep knowledge in the open network projects, especially this project we mentioned in the slides.
Great. And I have a personal question. I think it would be interesting, Saba, how is Bahrain working with the rest of the countries in the region, and what kind of leadership role are you taking in driving open source? You've mentioned a few of these areas, but I think it's good for the audience to know the leadership role that Bahrain is taking in open infrastructure.
So, as mentioned earlier, that we get to see that the telcos, and not even telcos, even the cloud providers these days, even within Bahrain and the region, are actually deploying a lot of open compute and open source infrastructure. So we would always welcome this from Bahrain in terms of policy making, in terms of making sure that there is the environment around where it is possible to strive forward always. So Bahrain would always like to become the leaders when it comes as an ecosystem, not just on a regulatory front, obviously. So this open technology and any advanced technologies, we let the operators and even the whole ICT environment to actually take its role before we come into where it would require our intervention as a regulator. So this is where we've always making sure that we're technology agnostic in terms of letting the technology be tested, and the operators and all the ecosystem taking care of where it is required.
And I think that that role of being agnostic plays very well into open source organizations where it's more of a community-based approach.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think, are there any, let's wrap things up here. Again, really appreciate everyone joining. Are there any last words, Ahmed, that you would like to say to the audience, or Saba, that you would like to address to the audience?
Yes. Actually, the concept of the open networks get confused in some people's, even who involved in the field of the networking. So I want to explain that we can see the open network from 2 points of view. The first point of view, that open networking using the open source software and hardware. So in this point, some people get confused. What about the other vendor like Cisco, Huawei? They will use also open source. So this will lead us to the second point of view of the open networking, that using the programmability. So the programmability for the vendors give them the ability to have a solution that can be easy integrated with the other platforms, cloud platform or other platforms. So open network, we can see from the open source hardware and software, and from the point of the view of the programmability or using the API in the network.
Very good points on the API and the programmability as being a big differentiator. Saba, any final words?
Yes, thank you. So I would like to thank you guys and the audience who joined today. This is
also, sorry.
Oh, sorry,
I
go ahead.
want to add something that, hello?
Yes, go ahead. Ahmed, go ahead.
Yes, Steve.
Yes, can you hear us, Ahmed?
Please go ahead, Ahmed.
Yeah, I want to add that um, I found that some people get difficult to understand this open networking, because actually it is built based on the new technology like software defined network and NFV, and most of the telco engineer and network engineer are not familiar with this kind of technology that added the programmability and using the API to enhance the network solutions. But also I want to revere the network engineer who like to learn about the open networking projects. We have also certifications programs. We have SDN 2 certificate. It is professional certificate. In this certificate, you can understand all the concepts of the SDN, NFV, open flow protocols, and P4, how to program your networks, different network interfaces. You can get it in this certificate. It is available in the ONF website. Just go to opennetwork.org. At the top, you can find the certification. You will get all details and blueprints for this certification.
Great. We have a few more questions here. So I spoke too soon about wrapping things up. So let's go on to the other questions here. How is the post support handled in ONF and OCP and the tip? So the post support is handled through our members. So if you're procuring a network switch or a rack of hardware, that relationship is through your service provider, whether it be two ways to procure. You can procure direct from the manufacturer, as I mentioned, and do it yourself. So then you would work directly with the manufacturer for that specific component for support. Or if you have a solutions provider or an SI or a systems integrator that then can be your prime or your point of contact that then manages those relationships. So the support model is very, very similar to the way that you work with an OEM if you use that service provider. And we have those systems integrators that sit between you and the manufacturer if you need that dedicated support team. Ahmed, how is the support handled in ONF?
Or just you can write at the chat, because I think I have a connection issue here, internet connection.
Okay, well, we may, all right.
Yes.
So we will certainly follow up on that piece. Are there any use cases of private network enabled in 6G? Not to my knowledge. Ahmed, I don't know if you can hear us okay?
Yes, can.
Okay. Are there any use cases of private networks enabled in 6G? And the other question was, how do you handle support for ONF? So if you could answer those two questions.
Okay, for 5G, I think we don't have now, but for the solution of the Ether, as I mentioned, it is deployed in different countries now, and it is available. So what ONF will do now, we will install the edge services in your parts at the enterprise to test the solutions, but the control itself, it is still with the ONF. So we are working with the CICD ONF process to ensure that the solution is good enough and solving many problems. And after that, I think by the end of this years, ONF will make this under Apache 2, and all the members can use this 5G. But I think for 6G, we don't have any solution yet, but we are working in different projects on that.
Okay. Another question here is, thank you, by the way, everyone, for all the questions. My question is it possible to phase the introduction of open platforms where you have a hybrid model for compatibility. It allows you to test a new environment instead of doing an entire shift over to the new infrastructure. And that is definitely the way people do it in open compute. In Japan, for example, they will start to test 1 or 2 racks or even a half rack for a few months, start to run some workloads in a test environment, and then slowly start to make that progression. The same way with central office. I do know that a few telcos are slowly moving their traditional central office to the new open architecture central office, where they are testing and running a hybrid environment. And I anticipate most enterprises running a hybrid environment forever. So sometimes they'll run OCP for certain workloads. Maybe some workloads cannot be moved to this open architecture for whatever reason. All right, let's see. Another question here. There are high breaking costs associated with starting or deploying open infrastructure and telco services. To further lure operators, is the TRA planning to offer any incentives to operators to go this direction? Saba, that question is for you.
Well, we've always incentivized different deployments, but not necessarily to technology specific. It could be to new services. So we are more interested into new services, obviously telco services, because we are a Telecommunication Regulatory Authority. So it depends on what is exactly the question targeting. We would be always looking to discuss these kind of opportunities for sure.
Great. All right. There is compatibility issues when using traditional telecom vendors when it comes to the software on a different infrastructure that the one they support or manufacture. How do you see this being solved when moving and testing to open source, to such open source projects? So the Ahmed, you dropped, but I hope you can hear us. Can you hear us okay? This question is for you. The question is interoperability. How do you handle interoperability? Yes. Yeah, how do you handle interoperability and testing within ONF?
Okay. Actually, for the ONF solutions, now if you see some company like HP, they have a hybrid switch. This switch working based on the traditional network and based on the open flow protocols. So it is easy to transfer from the traditional network to SDN network or using any open network foundation projects. So it is not difficult. So we have many scenarios, many telecoms shifted from the traditional smoothly to next generation network.
Great, thank you, Ahmed. A couple of comments also indicated the NTT, the Innovative Optical and Wireless Network, IOWN, is the forum to define 6G. For that is, so that's for those people that are for 2030 and after. There is a question here. Thank you very much for the talk. Does this infrastructure support big data frameworks? For our side, for definitely on open compute. If you look at our members and the ones that are doing a lot of work on AI and GPUs, these are the large hyperscalers. So Alibaba, Baidu, Tencent, Microsoft, Facebook, Yahoo Japan, all doing very, very intense big data GPU type of deployments, working together. So we have an entire project called the Open Accelerator Infrastructure Project to work together on GPU, the common baseboards, common designs, so that you can go out and you can quickly reiterate and quickly work with several manufacturers to put together a big data solution, again, being used in some of the largest hyperscalers in the world. So we certainly cover it on our side. Ahmed, are you doing anything around this software that would support big data frameworks?
Yeah, actually, ethers is support a GPU also. When we deploy the ethers GPU, it should be must, because all the platforms from the public clouds can be installed in the enterprise networks. So this will accelerate and enable the IoT and this big data process.
All right, thank you. And I think that is our last question. So now I'll turn it over to Saba for any final comments and a thank you to the audience.
Yes, so thank you very much, Steve and Ahmed, for this really good brief and updates for the industry, and thank you for the attendees and the questions. We'll definitely encourage a lot of more collaboration to come. If any of the local operators would be interested in bringing in Bahrain any of those community labs, whether it's with OCP, ONF, TIP, ORAN, we always encourage those kind of gatherings and collaborations, or even test labs to be brought to Bahrain. We will definitely be bringing more webinars such as this to the industry in the region. So thank you very much all, and thank you for attending.
Thank you all. Thank you very much, and look forward to the next webinar soon. So be looking for the links to the recorded session, as well as the slides where you can download those as well. Thanks again to everyone. Thank you, Saba. Thank you, Ahmed. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.